So recently, I came across content claiming that one of the markers of autism is the obsession level adherence to truth and the struggle with holding back or editing oneself in a way that may be more socially palatable. This led me down another rabbit hole of self-examination and quest for the greater truth behind why I've been called a bully, rude, mean, insensitive, reckless, crazy woman my whole life, as I believe no less than any regular women in the Middle Ages who spoke out and disturbed people enough to be labeled a witch to then be burned at stake. So now, regardless of why this compulsion exists in me, the consequences anyone can predict is about how this may be perceived by others. Telling the unfiltered truth often does come at the cost of offending people, while not sparing other people's feelings in the name of voicing that truth. No doubt, truth can be so disturbing, so ground shaking, that no wonder we develop countless ways to avoid, disown, dance around, sugarcoat, distort, or completely omit it for fear that naming it may hurt more than the contents of the truth itself. Life presents itself to the average human with so many traumatic experiences that wound us that no wonder denial, dissociation, escapism are some of the very common defense mechanisms to make life after certain trials bearable. The truth of what happened can literally be synonymous with the wound itself. We can't bear to look at it, we don't want to hear about it, and instead of facing it onwards and allowing ourselves to go through the pain until the sensitivity to its stimuli decreases and we do become stronger than its previous hold over us, we deal with it by mentally and emotionally running away from it, typically, as far as possible. We even go through life making choices exactly in opposition to it, as a reaction to it, so as to go far in the opposite direction in order to deny its very existence. So generally, all the negative feedback truth gets is, I believe, only a testimony to its validity. We tend to get more offended if words do reflect the reality, and deep down we know it, despite many subconscious layers of denial and deflection. As we all know, it's much less socially acceptable for women to be direct, disagreeable, and unlikable in general. So I ask myself in my quest to perhaps self-diagnose or to figure out what I need to be doing differently, or if this is even really necessary. I do admit that I do not particularly care too much about protecting other people's feelings in general. Unless it would only be cruel of me to be reckless in that way. So the necessary filters, social masks and gestures, those things aren't typically in my repertoire of the extra work I put into actively preventing people from having to come into close contact with a possibly painful truth. But there's almost never a deliberate ill intent to hurt on my end. Unless I feel the pain of truth is appropriate retribution or punishment, regardless of its usefulness in terms of helping improve the situation. I do admit there have been times I have willingly, knowingly utilized the potential pain of truth that it may inflict on someone as a means to implement my own version of justice, as a response to someone also willingly and knowingly inflicting pain on me or something I care about. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth type of deal. The commitment to truth, with the capital T in my case, is definitely a more heartfelt and genuine effort than a sort of mental disability or social malfunction based on an impulse based on my neurobiology, as if I have no control over it. I believe I'm aware of the consequences and the price that such commitment often entails in terms of my social status. If It's plain to see in capitalistic societies, presentation is just as much, if not more important than the contents we introduce to the market, whether that be ourselves or an actual product or service we're trying to sell. And ultimately, we all want to sell something in order to get something in return. We want to be loved. We learn early on that we must be both pretty and pleasant as women. We learn that society values looks and agreeableness, and our other traits are sadly much less relevant. Whatever has the highest market value, that's what we find out will have us be more valued in society. Obviously, much of that is rooted in our biology as well, but there are certain things that are valued, whether it's culturally or individually, and often subconsciously adapted to, that we can predict who is more likely to be viewed as more socially valuable than who isn't. For instance, when in a culture honesty and integrity is valued above material success, there would be much less cheating and lying practiced and justified than in a materialistic culture, where material success at any cost and by any means is valued more. Along those lines, anyone can observe that in most cultures across the world, women who are direct in communication and not super soft-spoken, carefully editing and omitting parts from the full spectrum of what they really want to communicate, are not received very well in general. Whether rooted in a mild to severe form of autism, or in a self-motivated, fully conscious adherence and a sense of loyalty to truth as a dear principle, or in a fully vicious, vindictive motive to want to hurt someone's psyche, this disposition is one that calls for a lot of courage. Sadly, female courage seems to often not even be detected in anyone's radar, let alone be celebrated or rewarded. Any decent-looking lady had, at one point, I believe, in their lives, came across a man who liked them and was at least initially ready to invest in her certain provisions, while the lady was not at all interested in the man himself, and this did offer her an opportunity to exploit through lying, since she could easily take advantage of that man's resources by effectively pretending to like him back and hiding the sinister motive of simply using him with no intention to give him what he needs from her. One might think of the scenario as more sinister than the dynamic of prostitution, in which there is no fooling and deceiving, that there's nothing more to be exchanged than a mere financial transaction for service. But in the above scenario, we see an enormous violation of ethics, indeed as enormous as when men lie and prey on women's emotional needs just to use their bodies. But do we really appreciate an honest woman who would never consider manipulating and lying to a man to reap benefits? Especially in a world in which, for many centuries, women had no rights or access to anything on their own terms by themselves, and their only access to anything was through the guardianship, control, or permits issued by a man she had to influence, either consciously or by manipulation. A world in which women were made to and were incentivized to lie and manipulate. A world in which women have figured out long ago that the average male ego is very easily influenced. Yet do we celebrate a woman's character when she's principled enough to never give in to this easy, quick scheme of social or financial advancement through exploiting people's weaknesses, in this case being men's need for female approval and ego stroking? How easily can you pretend to respect a man whom has done nothing to earn your respect? Aside from purposes of self-defense and survival, women editing their speech when the speech contains possibly the kinds of truths that can trigger and anger those to whom the speech is directed at, I believe it is fundamentally ethically wrong to lie and deceit. And I practice what I preach here out of a sense of moral obligation, which likely eliminates the possibility of diagnosis of autism in my own, I don't want to say defense, because even if I'm mildly autistic or whatever, it's not anything to have to defend, but I'm simply trying to sort of self-diagnose, as I know I'm fully capable of predicting how much of my output will be received, and in rare cases where I can be more self-preserving and calculated, as my somewhat heroic dedication to truth isn't so blind as to, for instance, tell a volatile, mentally sick person who is holding a sharp object in their hand something that will trigger them to actually commit a violent crime. So to understand violence against women all over the world, especially, I think all we have to do is to realize what triggers potential criminals statistically significantly more than anything else, I believe, especially in the case of this gender dynamics. It's a woman exposing the truth about what she thinks or what she feels about that person, possibly with little edits, little to no edits. So the truth in this case, via their deep sense of shame, what hurts these people at a level that turns them into monsters. Truth is associated with bravery, I think, because the truth is not for the faint-hearted. The sheer power of truth is enough to knock down the weak and the insecure among us. So the kind of courage it takes to shine a light on the truth can often be targeted by cowards who want to dim that light. We definitely have to be strong enough to handle the truth in many cases, which on the positive end will result in major leaps of growth, although painful, which is why people want to avoid it, obviously. And I believe that everything we value is somewhat rooted in a deeper emotional need, and it is clear to me that valuing truth is highly associated with the need for emotional safety, which expresses itself also as physical safety. Given someone who cares about our safety is more likely to provide the physical conditions such as healthy nutrition and shelter. We can trust someone who values truth. We feel safe in the presence of someone who stays true and loyal to their word. In an unpredictable world riddled with uncertainty at every corner, we find consistency and stability valuable. With hormonal fluctuations that impact our moods and abilities, especially as women, we thrive on anything that brings calm into the chaos of the shifting seasons of our biology. We associate love with strength because love fuels and keeps the North Star of our inner compass fixed at their best interest. We instinctively know that we need strength in our lives when our own muscles can't lift above certain weights. We know inner strength is just as much, if not more important than that muscle strength. We know only the strong can handle the truth in its raw form. We know if anybody can value and protect us, it's those who are emotionally and mentally strong. Those who won't fall apart, those who won't get overly reactive and defensive, throw temper tantrums in big displays of insanity, or simply shut down and completely abandon us. We know if someone is too fragile in their ego, they will always choose to protect just that instead of us. We know that they won't stay when we need them the most. When the going gets tough, the weak will ditch the vulnerable. If I allow someone into my life, I must examine their relationship to truth, second to learning their name even. I would go so far as to say this is one absolute solid marker of mental health and good, strong character, I believe, and I need this emotionally. It's a messy process, however, because testing strength of character, it takes time. It takes keen observation through challenging situations, and anyone can temporarily mask their strength and safety. We all want to trust. It's a very fundamental emotional need we share with all animals as well. Given how immensely valuable that feeling is, I say it's worth it, at least for me, every time I'm ashamed, labeled, accused, or denied access to certain social advantages for my commitment to truth. I just don't see my life with a certain level of idealism and adherence to a principle as fulfilling without it. And I don't find any relationship worth pursuing if it's built on and maintained through anything but truth, true love, true respect, true effort, and a sense of trust that is built on consistent dedication to that truth. And beyond defending truth being a sort of martyrdom that takes immense amount of courage, there is impending pain and suffering that knowingly going into battle entails. And that's not being taken seriously by people far below your level of intellect and otherwise capabilities. To not be seen, heard, or valued by those who are practically operating in the world as soulless bots with no authentic opinions or personalities of their own, because they're too weak to pursue anything but a fake life, isn't offensive to the one who is repulsed by that orientation. Yet, this still requires one to be emotionally so solid and stable like a rock, because it does mean going without a lot of your worldly needs, especially the emotional ones. Being almost subconsciously made invisible by people who deep down envy your talents and abilities and be reminded in your achievements of their own deficiencies and failures can be very hard on the average emotional human need to be acknowledged for things that make you special. To find yourselves involuntarily in competition with people who want to dim your light can be very disheartening. You may feel so unloved, and your sense of justice can be so fundamentally shaken that you may find yourself wishing them ill, not because anyone has to love or value you the way you deserve, but because you know you hold a treasure that you want to share and multiply, and it is painful to see it being actively trashed. And this is the experience of the average woman who isn't average in terms of things that don't matter to society, like her wisdom, originality, courage, her strength, her talents. This is a lonesome path, and it's not a path for the faint-hearted. Such a woman has to be so firmly grounded in her spirituality that worldly chaos, injustice, mistreatments, abandonments, assaults, insults, shaming, blaming, stealing from her, she may have to endure while on this world cannot knock her down.